Hello again, this is a chapter 4 video, and this chapter 4 video looks at collections. Had a previous video and you need to have had a look at that on the introduction of collections. There's also another video which is the internal view of the music organizer version 1, which is a good idea to either have a look at before this video or just after this video, as this video uses that as an example. Okay, so let's look at collections. So collections, otherwise known as parameterized types or generic classes, they provide a place to store and keep objects in memory. What you do is you create a collection of a specific type. So what we're going to do is we're going to create and use by example an array list of type string. So it is a collection of a certain type, and it is and in this case the collection type is ArrayList, and it's storing a type string. We declare we define the variable in the same way that we do other variables, with an access modifier, a type, and then the name of the field. Remember, what we're doing here is we're just creating an area in memory to store objects. That's all we're doing. It's as simple as that, and then we're just naming it something. So in this case here, we're naming it files. ArrayList is a generic class, and there's other generic classes out there. The ArrayList stores objects in a certain order, where there's other collections that store not in order, use hashes, use maps. There's some other bits and pieces which we're going to talk about later, but for the time being, ArrayList is the one we're going to use to talk about collections. Quick question for you. We had a look at our array list of type string. So how might we define an array list of type clock display called ClockList? Pause the video and have a think about that now. Also, how might you find 5 further methods in of the ArrayList class? So you can pause the video and look into that now. So hopefully you were able to find that out. First of all, look at our definition of an array list of type clock display called ClockList. So here we have private access modifier array list of type clock display, so that's the type of the object, and then ClockList, which is the name of the object. So I've got a comparison there of just a very simple field declaration of type int, and that's exactly the same as what we're doing. We've got an area in memory to store type ints, and we've now got an area in memory to store an array list with some clock display types stored in it. Okay, and we're going to call that ClockList. In terms of the other question, which was the name of the 5, what we do is we go to the Java API, shown here. What we can do then is we select the All Classes window, just an area of white space in there, do a little search for ArrayList, and there's the array list. Click on the array list type, and then scroll down and have a look at the methods. Okay, so in our methods here, we've got add methods. We've got an add method with 2 different parameter lists here. Clear methods, clone contains other methods, etc. The left hand side, it shows the modifier and type. So in this case, it's the Boolean is the return type, and here we've got a parameter list of type elements, which we'll look at later. Just a little quick one. When we define our array list of type string, we did what was previously that, but when we go into our constructor, we would normally do something like this. In Java 7 though, we've made it a bit easier, or Sun have made it, or Oracle rather, have made it a bit easier, and all you need to do is that, and it just works out what type it's going to be. Here's an object diagram showing what we're talking about. In the music organizer class, we've got a field called files. That field is of type array list of string. So we've got a reference which points to our object there, which is our array list of string. Within that object, you can store different types of string objects. So for example, we've got one there which is the Morning Blues string, and then we've got the other one which is the Don't Go string. So that's our object structure in our object diagram. If we want to, then we can add a third string object to our array list of type string, which is called files. So we can add Matchbox Blues to our files array list. Some features of the collection which you may need to bear in mind: it will get bigger as you add things to it, and it will keep account of how big it's, how many objects are stored within it. We use our size method for that, which is an accessor. It keeps the order of the objects. Again, other generic classes don't keep the order. Other collections don't keep the order, but the ArrayList one does. How all this works, you don't need to know. You just use it and use away on it. And so just use abstraction for that. In terms of using the collection, here we've got the music organizer class, and we can see at the top there we've got the field which is defined. Again, access modifier, type and name, no difference there. All we're doing is creating that type. We've then got a method in the class, which is the add file method. It doesn't return anything, and it takes a parameter of one type string. So this is what we're going to use to add our strings to our collection. We then use the files array list, and then use our dot notation for our method call. So we do files.add, and that method is defined in the class, in the ArrayList class, which was on the Java API. If you can remember that that add method takes an elements parameter type. So in this case, because the ArrayList is made up of string elements, the element in this case is a string, and the string which it's using is the file name string. Another method we've got is to return the how many files are stored, or how many objects are stored in the array list, in our files array list. So if we just ignore the return word for a second, if we call files and then the method, which is the size method, we're going to get an integer is returned from that, which is how big or how many objects are stored currently in the array list. We can then shortcut it and just return that integer, and so that actually gets returned then if this method is called. So that's our public int get number of files. In terms of our index numbering, when we use array lists, they're given a specific index number. So the first one you create is given as 0, and the second one is 1, and the third one is 2, as shown on the screen there. Other collections don't have numbers, whereas array lists do. The final method which we're going to consider now is this retrieving of a specific object method. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to get, in this case here, we're trying to get, say we wanted to get the Matchbox Blues file name from the array list, from our files array lists. What we do is we put in the index, which in this case would need to be 2, and then we need to retrieve that specific object. Now what we've got here is we've got if index is greater or equal to 0, because if someone puts a minus number in, that's not going to be correct, and is the index is less than files.size. So just to make sure that they haven't put in an index which is bigger than the actual size of the array list, that will then check that. If that is true, or if that Boolean expression there is true, then it will go ahead and get that string. So what it will do is, first of all, you create a local variable, a temporary local variable called filename of type string. You then use the get method, which again is found in the API. So you do an external method call on the files object, and then use the get method, and that takes a parameter of type integer, which is the same type that the list file method takes. That integer is then used to get the actual file name, and that file name variable is then used. System.out.println will then print out the specific file name which you retrieved. We can always put in the else statement there. So if the index is before or is less than 0 or greater than the size of the array list, then we know that's not a correct number, so then we can print out that error message there. Okay, so that's the list file method. The numbering may be affected, so we may need to deal with this in code. So for example, if we've removed a certain, so previously we had morning blues, don't go, and matchbox blues, whereas we've removed the don't go string there, but now all of a sudden matchbox blues has been given a slightly different index number, so we need to be aware of that as we do our programming. Final slide then, in terms of the indices, some general notation and terminology here. Next is otherwise known as index +1, previous is index -1, last is list.size -1, we'll give you the last index, and then the first three is shown there as we saw that. Quick review then of collections. They allow an arbitrary number of objects to be stored. These collections have been tried and tested, and they're very good, so there's no point in creating your own one. The libraries which we're using, in this case we're using the java.util package is how they're known as, and then the ArrayList is part of that java.util package. When using the ArrayList, remember you must import that package at the beginning of your code. Items can be added, removed, they all have a specific index. And these index values can change if things go backwards and are brought in and out of the array list. Now remember, you need to code for that. The main methods that we use, that you're going to use when you write your code, are the add, get, remove, and size methods. And it's known as a parameterized or generic type or generic class. So that's our array list. Okay. Any questions? Then we'll discuss that in class tomorrow. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.